the county currently has a rent stabilization program in place that's set to expire in May 2022. Can you say whether you support a permanent program of rent stabilization across the county? Why not? And more broadly, can you speak to what is your plan for the quote unquote gradual eviction crisis that advocates say is going to play out in the county and elsewhere over the course of this year?
Okay, and for this, which is a 2-minute round, we will start with, we'll go Mr. Hucker, Reamer, Blair, and then Elrich. So Mr. Hucker, you're up for 2 minutes.
Thanks, Will. Big question, Rebecca. In terms of rent stabilization, yes, we have put that in place during the pandemic and these extreme circumstances, and I voted for it both times. People should realize, have rent stabilization built into our housing policy in Montgomery County through our MPDU program and through our very vigorous investments in HOC and our nonprofit housing developers. Our MPDU program has been a national model because it doesn't segregate poverty in just some buildings. It distributes affordable housing around the county. Does it need to be improved and updated? Yeah, I believe it does. But it's been a model for other jurisdictions, and we need to improve it and continue to make it more accessible and to include truly affordable units by lowering the floor, updating the range, making other creative changes like that, and working with our affordable housing providers to meet the needs of the market. I also believe in rent stabilization in targeted areas like along the Purple Line, where a big public investment by the state potentially is going to drive up rents for both residential and commercial properties. So I've been staying in close touch with the leaders of the Purple Line Compact to ensure that the Purple Line doesn't lead to unwise gentrification there. I've been fighting for the Purple Line for a very long time, and none of us want to see anyone who has been there surviving, paying taxes on that underserved corridor being pushed out by increasing rents along there. And I support other things like a right to counsel and a robust policy agenda that go along with rent stabilization to keep people out of court. The eviction crisis that we've had in Montgomery County and the region is really a missed opportunity, I think. I've called on the administration for a year to set up a STEP program, strategic targeted eviction prevention program like Baltimore County has, to take the burden off tenants and put it on landlords to remove entire lists of tenants from threat of eviction and get the landlord to pay a partial payment, to accept a partial payment so they can stretch the funding much longer. What this administration's been doing, siphoning 15% of our federal dollars off for administration of DHCA and wasting money that we could be applying to keep people in their homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I suspect we'll all need the 1-minute rebuttal time here. It's a big question, but I appreciate that. Mr. Reamer, you're up next for your 2 minutes.
Thanks. Well, I'd just like to start by flagging, I strongly disagree with the county executive's comment that new development in Bethesda is causing it to become a segregated community. I mean, have you been to Bethesda? Mm-hmm. We have a significant racial disparity in where people live in this county, known as segregation. It's not legal, of course, but that is the reality of this county. And, it long predates changes. And in fact, the changes that we're trying to make are specifically intended to open up access and to allow new housing types that are more affordable, to allow more people to live on the west side of the county. And it takes development often to make that happen. So, that I really strongly disagree that the housing policies we're advancing are doing anything other than opening up access and reducing the historic legacy of segregation. As for the eviction crisis, I'm proud of the work that we've done at the county council to support tenants. Evictions today are lower than they were before the COVID crisis. And we need to maintain the protections as long as we are in a crisis. I voted to extend the council's SMART framework around the rental increase moratorium because of the crisis. So we need to be responsive to the facts on the ground. I have been a strong advocate for tenant legal assistance, and I will continue to do that. Support for grassroots organizations that work with tenants so they know their rights. We have to empower tenants to stand up for themselves and to protect them in court. And ultimately, agree with Tom's characterization of the MPDU program. I'm a strong believer that a share of our housing market should be under price protection, but I would achieve that through nonprofit development rather than rent control.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reamer. Mr. Blair, your 2 minutes.
Thank you. So housing is everyone deserves to have housing. They deserve to be able to afford in the county that they work. With that being said, I don't believe that long-term broad rent control will solve our affordable housing problem. Though I do very much support rent control during the crisis, and clearly we're still in one. I also support tenants against unfair and wrongful evictions, and there are immediate changes we must continue to pursue. Let's follow what Virginia's doing and provide more notification time before an eviction. Clearly, tenants deserve a right to counsel, as we've heard at eviction hearings. I'm pleased that our legislators passed that last session, and now as a county, let's hold the state to its commitment to fully fund it. Raising eviction fees is clearly effective. It's both potentially a way to help fund right to counsel, and it's a method to prevent that horrible practice of landlords mass filing evictions. I'd evaluate the Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs and determine if are there more effective ways through their process to hold landlords accountable for maintaining quality living conditions. And also, let's make sure that the renters all know their rights. But as I said, I don't believe rent stabilization will address the root cause. And in fact, there's research that suggests that long-term rent control dampens the creation of new housing units, as well as increase the number of rental units that are being converted to condominiums. So for example, in Tacoma Park, I believe rent control has been there for many, many years. And in the city, they've seen a decrease of 18% of rental units since 2000. I think the key, going back to what I said earlier, the key is building more affordable units, particularly maximizing housing construction where transit and transportation infrastructure exists, such as White Flint, Shady Grove, Forest Glen, and future Purple Line stations.
Thank you, Mr. Blair. And Mr. Elrich, your 2 minutes.
So a couple of things. One is that, the new housing being planned, Park and Planning evaluated East Silver Spring and looked at what would happen if they built this missing middle housing, and their conclusion was the new units would actually be more expensive than the existing units. So it's really hard to see how this is going to solve an affordability problem. And I think skating around Bethesda is really interesting because the plan to let neighborhoods reshape themselves is totally voluntary. It could happen quickly, it could happen not at all. We have no control over that. The zoning that you put on top of property that is going to get torn down and massively redeveloped, when 2- and 3-story buildings go to be 20-story buildings, and you create all that wealth and all that new property, that's a place where you have control. That is the one thing where we absolutely have the ability to guarantee that we can control the price of housing. And that's a place where we don't do it. We take the few MPDUs we get, and that's the end of the day. And then we create a system where they can get out of the MPDUs. So yeah, Bethesda, because of income, is more segregated than other parts of the county. Not all the county with single family zoning, though, is segregated. So it's specific to the incomes and the prices of housing in particular areas. Nonprofit development is not going to solve your problem. As I tried to point out, if I built 10,000 affordable units and got 1,500 MPDUs, that doesn't even take care of the new people who are coming here, let alone the people at 32% of AMI, 20,000 of them who are spending 60% of their income, or the people between 30 and 50% of AMI, another 24,000 people who can't find affordable housing, or the 30,000 or 27,000 that are coming here in the next 10 years for whom no affordable housing will be built in quantity. So relying on the nonprofits to do this the way it is right now is not going to happen. I'm hoping, frankly, that I get interest from the nonprofit community in building on the county's assets, which are our parking lots.
Thank you, Mr.
So we can actually control that differently.
Thank you very much. Anyone like 1 minute?
Sorry, Will, could I just jump in to ask a quick follow-up of the county executive that I hope you can address during his follow-up time? I'm just wondering if he could say directly whether he supports a countywide rent control law or not.
Oh, ran out of time. Yeah, I would support a countywide rent control law, but I would be specific about a couple of things. One, I would put a cutoff date for properties older than a certain date. District has a similar law. I wouldn't put it on new construction because we're going to have at least MPDU requirements at the very least, and hopefully stricter MPDU requirements to assure more affordable housing in the future. I would craft the law so it allowed landlords to get increases above the rent guidelines in cases where their expenses exceeded what the rent guidelines would allow. The City of Tacoma Park did that. It made the law work a lot better. It removed some of the objections that landlords had that they couldn't make money in the buildings. We have a requirement, we can't take away a person's ability to be profitable. So I would maintain a lot of the features that the city law has. I would not do vacancy decontrol because that just causes trouble where people rent their units to somebody else at a higher price than rent control, but it never gets on the market. See, it's like New York City, which is not a good model for it. So I think we could build a sensible, workable program that focused on the housing that's most at risk of being lost, and today constitutes the basis of our affordable units.
Thanks so much. Mr. Reamer, good for a minute.
Thanks. Well, I have a different vision. Let's talk about the Purple Line Corridor. It's really important. The Purple Line Corridor Coalition has come together and said, working with community groups from renters and low-income communities and Hispanic communities, organizations, has said, in order to preserve the long-term affordability of the Purple Line Corridor when the train comes in and there'll begin to be pressure, in order to have a balance of housing types and affordability levels, we should put about another 6,500 units of housing under control, meaning under nonprofit ownership or under some kind of price restriction. Since then, new development has, and some redevelopment has produced about 1,500 units. So we're now at about 5,000 units of housing that have to be claimed or controlled by some kind of mission-driven ownership. We can do that. We can do this. We can finance affordable housing projects in the Purple Line Corridor, help nonprofits buy buildings, redevelop them over time, and meet the affordability goals while allowing the market to thrive and grow and change. These two goals don't have to be at each other at odds.